everyone, I'm Tom Willford here today with Bryan Kazarian, and we have Isabella in the background here who's going to be asking a couple questions. We want to talk today a little bit about our background, how we met, and we're going to talk about some cases too. And Bryan practices criminal law, I practice personal injury, a lot more crossover than you'd imagine. Uh, we've both been practicing 35 years. We took the bar together.
Well, I think you should talk about the time we took the bar. We took the bar in February of 1991, right?
91, yeah.
Passed the bar in June of 1991.
Well, you find out your results 4 months later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So we had
right.
to wait 4 months. During that 4 months, we went and vacationed a little bit. That was
That's
fun.
right. We actually went down to San Diego to take the bar. And then from there, we went straight to, before we even knew our results, went down to San Diego and had a few drinks, I guess you would call it, huh?
Yeah. Actually, I took the bar in Pasadena, so we
Oh, you
didn't.
did?
We took it at the same time, but we took it at different
Oh,
locations.
that's right.
And
That's
I
right.
was,
You met
and
us.
I'm from San Gabriel. We were both born and raised in L.A. And you in Montebello, right?
Right, right. Born and raised in Montebello.
And I was raised in San Gabriel. Lived in L.A. and Orange County my whole life.
Right.
But so I was up in San Gabriel at the time, which is why I took it in Pasadena. And then, yeah, we went down to Rosarito and had some fun, and
Yeah.
Mammoth, I think, afterwards.
Yeah. So I
Just
don't know really
steam.
what this all has to do with our practice, but it tells us a lot of people about what we do, huh? Like
Yeah, exactly.
real people that are real lawyers that act like everybody else and try to do our job and do the best that we can.
Yeah. What made you decide to become an attorney? I wasn't even sure I was going to do that initially.
That's a great question. I get that question often, and it's a very difficult question to answer because um, I don't know if I really wanted to be a lawyer initially. I think it was something that I was combed and brought up that my parents said, "You're going to go to law school." And I was just grew up saying, "I'm going to go to law school." I didn't even know what that meant.
That's funny because I had the opposite experience. My dad was an attorney. My uncle, my cousin, they all practiced for decades. And my dad told me not to become an attorney because it was so stressful, and ended up doing it anyway. And glad I did.
Yeah, it was a crazy thing in my culture. You basically do what your parents tell you to do, and so and my parents from the get. I remember going to Knott's Berry Farm as a kid, probably 8, 9 years old, and you had those character casts where they do a profile drawing of you, and it's like who do you, and then they
The
write in there, who do you
cartoon
want to be
pictures.
when you grow up, and I want to be a lawyer when I grow up, and so I thought that I think that that was ingrained in my head since I was a kid. So, and I didn't even know what that meant. I don't know the difference between being a lawyer or being a rubbish man back then.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because I always thought, I mean, when I was growing up, I wanted to be an astronomer, or I love space and that kind of thing. So I um, really becoming an attorney was not on my radar. Um, but I'm glad I did, and I love the part of being an attorney that we can change people's lives. We can really help people. And I think that's one of the things that I like about it the most. Because there are times when we do things and the law itself is pretty tough, I think. So many great aspects of it.
Well, they say that being an attorney is one of the most influential times or occupations. I mean, they're in Congress, uh, they're judges, they're the people that make laws. The reason why we have safety nets around various things, probably because a lawyer brought up a fact that it would it's it's hazardous to have that and got sued. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that
And politicians too.
yeah,
Most politicians are attorneys, which is why a lot of people don't like attorneys.
right, right. So there's a lot of good things that we do also.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. I talk to people in general in public, and they find out I'm an attorney, and I get two reactions. One is, I don't like you, or I need your help.
Yeah, same here. I always get oh, you have you heard the joke about the attorney? And it was always some derogatory joke about an attorney. So back when I was a kid, being an attorney was very, very prestigious. And it seems that over the years that the public has a perception of it being degraded a little bit. But I don't believe that it is because I think that it takes a huge tenacity to go through law school. It takes a huge tenacity. At least when we took the bar, it was 3 days and a fourth day for professional responsibility. Now they've narrowed it down to 2 days.
Well, and back then we couldn't take it on a computer. Now they're taking it on a computer. We hand wrote our bar,
That's right.
pen and paper.
Pen and paper. And at the end of the 3 days, your hands
Yeah.
in a knot because you had to write it the whole thing.
I remember some of the newer attorneys you have in your office were asking about the bar, and they were just shocked that we were. uh, I think David, he was saying, what do you mean hand wrote it? Like with pen and paper?" And just hard for people to comprehend.
I know.
And now just we live with computers, and so especially now with AI too, I think that's going to really make a big difference in our and the way we practice.
That's a whole nother subject, AI, and how it will or will not affect us. But I think one of the great things that we have as attorneys is that I think we have job security, because I think that being an attorney is something that you have to have analytical skills, and you have to have something of a human brain to be able uh, to come up with the right results, um, to go and appear in court, to argue various things. I don't see AI taking over our position. I see AI helping us, but I don't see AI actually going into court and arguing our case for us.
Well, yeah, I think AI, a lot of people talk about that. I remember when computers came out and people said, oh, they're going to steal our jobs. I don't think any jobs are going to be stolen. I think we're going to be more productive with AI. I think that AI is going to help us move along. Some jobs may become obsolete, I think, but in general, it's just going to make us more productive. I don't think any jobs are going to be stolen. But I remember with the analytical part, growing up with a father that was an attorney, we would play those, what do they call the little games, the logic games.
Mhm.
I had a book of those when I was a kid, and he would go through it with me, and we'd play those logic games.
Mm.
And I don't know, kind of that analytical mind. I think you're right. It makes a big difference. And one of the reasons I like law. That's fun.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your firm? And you practice a specific area of law?
Yeah, I'm practicing personal injury. Now, I've done different types of law. I've started out practicing business litigation and some collection work. And so when companies have disputes, uh, we would sue one of the other business, and any kind of with business, there's always disputes. But I didn't care for it so much because, uh, especially when you're talking about a firm that has two partners that have split off, it's almost like a divorce. I mean, it can get really nasty. Um, did some family law for a couple of years. That was kind of drove me crazy. It's really an emotional field, and I know that people are. You're almost a psychologist as well. I've done a little bit of immigration law too,
Mm.
but now I'm practicing personal injury. I really like it. I kind of initially stayed away from personal injury because you hear about ambulance chasers, and you hear about, well, people are, get in these small accidents and they're not really hurt, but looking for money. But now that I've really been doing it for over 20, 30 years, it's something that I really enjoy doing because when you have somebody who's genuinely hurt, insurance companies are really difficult to deal with. They don't protect the injured person, and so they have a voice and a right, and feel like we're fighting for justice.
Hmm.
And you practicing criminal law, I think that's really great too, because um, when you have people who maybe have committed crimes, there are many that are innocent, and even the ones that aren't, you want to make sure that they're not unfairly punished. And tell us a little bit about that. I mean, how do you like doing it?
Well, after graduating law school, I actually substitute taught and coached football for a period of time until I could figure out what I wanted to do. Not for a long period; it was about 6 months. And I initially took a insurance defense job, which is the opposite of you. I would be the lawyer that would have been um, opposing you as the plaintiff's PI
I didn't
person.
know you were doing that. I don't even know I'd be talking to you
Yeah,
right now
well,
if I knew that.
I did it for about 6 months, and then I heard that the Orange County District Attorney's Office was had an application opening, and so I applied to the Orange County District Attorney, which, by the way, was totally different than what I really wanted to do. When I became a lawyer and out throughout law school, if you would have asked me, "What do you want to do with your degree?" I would have told you that I wanted to be a corporate lawyer or an entertainment lawyer. or a real estate lawyer. And I didn't even know what that meant because it just sounded sexy to me, but I didn't even know what it meant. But um, being getting into the criminal field was diabolically opposite of what I was actually thinking. But I fell in love with it because while I was working for the insurance defense firm, one of the partners was an ex-public defender, and he would still get occasional criminal cases, either appointed by the judge or private. And I got to appear on a few of them as a criminal defense attorney. And I remember going into court and having to be able to to speak in front of the judge and to talk in front of the judge, which was something I never did as a as a insurance defense attorney, because all I ever did was summarize depositions, summarize interrogatories, maybe get to sit in on a deposition, but nothing to do with court. And if it was court, it was going in to pick another date. I was actually doing some real live litigating, and that's what I felt like being a lawyer was.
That's so amazing too, because I know a lot of attorneys when they start out, we don't get it to see the courtroom. And I was fortunate. I worked for another firm when I first got out of law school. And the first week I started with him, he came in the day before. Came in like that evening. It was a Wednesday night. He said, "I'm going to have you try this case tomorrow." I said, "What do you mean try it?" He said, "Yeah, it's a trial. It's going to be very simple. I had one client and I had one defendant, and it was a bench trial. But he told me what to ask, and I went in and tried it first week. And you got to get in there. And I was so fortunate because he really put me into the courtroom. And a lot of people don't get that experience, and that's what makes us. And now we've got that, what, 1,000 trials under our belts.
Yep. I've uh I've spoken to so many attorneys who've never even been into the courtroom except to get a continuance. Um, I know that when I was hired by the district attorney's office, my first position was a juvenile court where we were prosecuting juvenile minors for committing crimes. I stayed there for a year and actually did about 55 court trials, probably another 55 evidence taking motions, which are
Wow.
tantamount to a court trial. So by the time I left the juvenile court after a year, I probably had 100 and some odd trials under my belt where there was actually a judge, a witness, evidence taking, objections, closing arguments, everything but jury selection. And then after that, I was pushed off to adult misdemeanors, and there I did my stint to be at the various courts in Orange County and the West Justice Center, the Harbor Justice Center, Central, where we did actual misdemeanor jury trials for adults. Um, and there I did around 50 jury trials before being elevated to the felony panel, where we actually did jury trials there and did probably another 30 there. And then went on to be the head of the Target Costa Mesa gang unit. And
Wow.
so,
That must have been a little wild.
yeah, that was a great one. I had some really high profile cases. It was nice to be recognized. It was scary to be in the paper. I had a few cases where they were very very high profile, and they were high profile because of various public figures that might have been in those that we won't mention who they are or what they were. And there were also some notorious street gangs that were involved that we won't mention those names, but they came down here to Orange County and did some very violent things, and I got to prosecute them. So,
Yeah, please don't mention them. I don't want to be involved in this one.
so after that, I switched sides because that was really the only thing I ever knew was criminal law. And being a district attorney, that's all you do is practice criminal law. You're prosecuting people and putting them in jail or punishing them, so to speak, or instrumenting judges justice on that. And so I've had my defense firm for about since 2011. I have there's 3 lawyers and several support staff. We have a few locations, and we practice in basically in Orange County, LA County, and the Inland Empire.
Yeah, that's really interesting too. I've got a great support staff, and that's the most important thing. As an attorney, we can't handle it by ourselves. There's way too much to do, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done that the help really does. And you have some attorneys in your office that can kind of handle a lot of the prelim trials. And
Well, in my line of work, as far as a criminal defense attorney, that you actually have a client as opposed to being a district attorney. And so a lot of things we have to handle on our own, like emailing our client because they always have a question that they want answered by the lawyer. So there's a lot of stuff that happens from our support staff, but it's more like, answering calls and setting up appointments, maybe making copies and scanning and various things like that. But some of the, talking to the client and communicating with them is something that we'd have to do on our own.
And that's a good point too. You made clients always want to talk to the attorneys, and I know a lot of firms, especially personal injury firms. A lot of times the clients don't even talk to the attorney, and I make it a point, and I know you do too, to start out talking to the attorney and talking to them throughout the process.
Right.
I think that's something that clients really want to see. So,
Yeah. I've been really fortunate. The two lawyers that I've had several other lawyers over the years, but the two lawyers I had have been with me for over 10 years. And I plucked them straight out of law school
I
as
was going to
you,
say, didn't you teach them? Well, you
yeah.
were their teacher in law
Yeah.
school.
So yeah, so I created and teach a legal clinic for Trinity Law School, and I was able to uh, take some of the students that I have after they graduated, and so I was able to teach them how to be an attorney, how I want them to be an attorney. So they're littler versions of me, and they got trained by to think like a DA and perform like a defense attorney.
Yeah, I've had that issue too, where you bring in people. It's kind of a funny dynamic when you're hiring somebody. You want somebody who's had some experience because training somebody is really a lot of work. But at the same time, when you train them yourself, you get to train them the way that you want to do things, I think. I think it helps we've had so much experience that I think it's important to train them properly. So I know when I'm training somebody, I like to do it to train them with through all my experiences we've been through. We all have so many stories about the crazy trials we've had, and just going in law and motion is tough sometimes. Uh, but training them the way you want. But at the same time, that's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, people probably don't understand what law of motion is. What is that?
Oh, so wow, when you get into you first file a complaint, I know, first file a complaint and you have to serve it on the defendant. Then you get into discovery and you make motions in front of the court to have the judge rule on certain parts of the case. Uh, Not sure how would you describe that.
Yeah, that's right.
Um,
Well, there's various motions for us to either ask the opposing party to do something or not do something, asking the judge to order them to do something.
and then you have the attorneys who are playing games, and you tell the judge to make them come to the table. And a lot of times they won't respond to discovery properly, and you have to go in and have the judge scold them, and so you get your proper responses.
Let's
It's really funny too, though. I remember we were talking about one of your criminal cases, and I was helping out a friend and came to you and I asked you about how do I get discovery in this case, and you said, well, you just ask the district attorney. In civil court, it's a lot different. We have to file them. We have to serve them. They have 30 days to respond. If they don't respond the way you want them to, then you have to go in and ask for more responses. Criminal court is a lot different than that.
It sure is. So let's talk about that. Let's talk a little bit about the differences between civil, which is the area of law that you practice, right?
Right.
And criminal, and that's really the only two types of law that we have. Is that right? In the United States,
Well, I mean, you have probate, which is, dealing with wills and trusts,
but isn't that
like
civil?
patents and things like that. Yeah, I guess it's still civil.
Yes.
Maybe patents might be the only thing that's a little different,
I still think that's I still. I mean, that's
but the two,
federal civil
yeah,
in my opinion.
yeah.
So
But yeah, the two general categories are criminal and civil.
so you practice civil law, and I practice criminal law. So let's talk about some of that procedurally different, and the difference between um, if you have other venues or jurisdictions that you get to go to as opposed to in criminal, about going to court. In other words, you have possible mediation, possible arbitration, you have depositions. All of these are out of court experiences, right?
Oh, they're two different ball games altogether. And I think when, that's an important thing. When my parents grew up, my father practiced every type of law. Like there was just a general practice back then. And he did criminal cases, he did civil, he did wills, he did trusts. He tried a murder case one time and then went in and sued a business for in a civil. I think it's really important nowadays to specialize because if I were in a criminal courtroom, I would have no idea what to do. And the procedures are so different. Um, it's still the law. You still have precedent based on other cases, but the procedure, I think, is the biggest difference. In criminal law, we have to file a complaint. I'm sorry, in civil law, we have to file a complaint. We first try and settle the case. We deal with the insurance companies. Once we file a complaint, and if they're not paying what we want, then we deal with the attorneys and we're in court. And the process is much different than it is with criminal law, I
Well,
think.
just for clarification, you represent the plaintiff or the person who's injured or the person bringing the lawsuit, right? In your situation.
Yeah, of course. And that's a good point I want to come back to. You mentioned how you were a DA when you went to the defense side. It's really helpful, I think, for you to have the DA background because you know what they're looking for. I think it'd be helpful. You worked for a defense firm. Um, you really have a good idea of what they're looking for. But the procedure, yeah, is much different when it comes to civil law.
Yeah. So yeah, it would be tantamount to you working for an in-house counsel for one of these larger insurance companies defending against a plaintiff PI, and
Exactly.
then all of a sudden you want to then take off and start up your own practice and become a personal injury attorney who are representing the plaintiffs who are injured. So you know what the insurance company is going to do, because you used to do that. You used to
Right.
be there. You were the person who was opposing everybody. You were the person who was trying to poke holes, so to use a slang in other people's cases. So it's the same with me when I was on the district attorney's side. I was prosecuting and I was hard charging moving forward. Now that I'm on the other side, I know what the district attorney is going to do. I know what they're thinking. I know their inside procedures. I know the internal runnings of it, how it works when the police send a report in, where it goes, when it gets assigned, what happens, how it gets filed. All that's very, very important if you are going to zealously advocate for your client, because they want somebody who knows that.
And insurance companies, I've been able to learn what the insurance companies do by talking to attorneys, either defense attorneys or people that have worked in the defense. But it is really important because the insurance companies in personal injury, they have a system. We've all heard insurance companies deny everything initially.
Mhm.
Um, the, I think that if I've had a lot of issues too, where clients have come to me, tried to represent themselves, but the insurance companies, they use a Colossus system to come up with numbers because what's the value of a case? It's really a broad spectrum. There's no schedule that says if you have a broken arm, it's worth $100,000, or if you have a brain injury, it's worth this. There's a lot. It's a lot more complex than just you have an injury and this is how much it's worth. But the insurance companies, they have a process that they go through to determine how they're going to handle the case, and if they think they can pay less, their goal is to pay as little amount of money as possible. So I think it's really helpful to see that other side.
So I would imagine I'm an attorney, and actually, you and I practiced a little bit together on the personal injury side, just
Right.
for helping you out and litigating part of it. So I have an idea how that works, but I'm sure most attorneys who don't practice personal injury law, and I'm sure the public doesn't understand. And so why don't you tell us? Why don't you tell us how does somebody obtain money? Uh, if they are injured in a suit, what is it that the insurance company and or the plaintiff's attorney, the injured person's attorney, what do they use? What denomination or what method do they use in order to determine what a person's case is worth?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a pretty broad question because they use a lot of different factors. But I think, like I said, when people come to me and ask what's my case worth, I have a lot of questions for them. One, liability in a case is important. And that's something I'd like to talk a little bit about too, because the criminal aspect really plays into what a case is worth. So if you're driving on the freeway, and if somebody commits a violation of law, let's say my client is driving in the freeway and two people are changing lanes together, you have to first prove that the other person's at fault. And that comes into play. Sometimes it's partially the other person's fault. Sometimes it's partially our client's fault. And there's always the easy ones where it's a rear ender, you're stopped at a light, and somebody comes up and hits you. Well, then that's not a factor. But if you get down the road and there is a dispute and liability, that affects the value of the case. Of course, the biggest is your injuries. How much are you injured? What are your injuries? How has it affected your life? We all look at that on what because when you're in an accident, it really can affect your life greatly. You have to go to the doctor. How often do you have to go to the doctor? How is it taken away? Sometimes you can't work. If you can't work, you're out of money. What's your future care going to be? A lot of people will go through injuries and treat with the doctor, but they haven't fully healed. You're supposed to be able to get back to 100% after an injury or after an accident, and a lot of times you don't get there. So what's your future care? And so we have doctors that'll testify about what the client's injuries are, and they talk about what they're going to need in the future. So there's a lot involved in how a case is valued, and the insurance companies know that too. And so one of the things they do is try and put fault on our client and try and minimize the injury. Or one of the big things that happens is we've all gone through injuries. We're a little bit older now. I'm not the same guy I was when I was 20 years old. I used to run triathlons, and I'm not doing that anymore. So our injuries affect us a lot more as we get older. And so I think all of that comes into play, and we really insurance companies kind of know that they know ways of trying to show, one, that you're at fault for the accident. You could have done something different. Your injuries were not necessarily caused by the accident. It's from the degeneration of us getting older. And so one of the things we do is we look at the client, where were they before the accident? Were they able to play sports? And then afterwards, their injuries have affected them, so they can't play sports anymore. So an insurance company will try and say, well, the injury wasn't caused by the accident because he had these other problems before. He had back problems. He had seen a chiropractor before. But that's great. We've been to the doctor, all of us, but what were you able to do before the accident that you can't do afterwards? And so there's a lot involved in how to value a case.
I think that the public probably wants to know that answer, and I think the short answer would be, correct me if I'm wrong, that you or the insurance company you monetize injuries or pain and suffering or future medical expenses, and that's how a case gets valued. That's the short answer, right?
Absolutely.
That's
A little bit shorter than my answer. And each aspect of that, how did you feel before? How did you feel after? What are your injuries? What is it worth for missing work? What is it worth for the injuries and the time you've had to spend, for the pain that you went through?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the micro answer, and the macro answer is the
Come
easier.
to an attorney so we can evaluate it for you and make the arguments. And we look at every aspect of the case.
I'm looking at your mic right now, and it says the Willford Law Corporation. Tell us a little bit about that.
I'm not sure what you mean by that. How I came up with that?
Well, no, I mean it looks like, so you're Tom Willford, and the name of your company is
Willford, yeah, Willford Law Corp, and 35 years we've been doing this, and because their law office is a Kazarian.
Yeah. So yeah, that's our logo is the law office is a Bryan R. Kazarian, and we on our websites we have this red BRK standing for Bryan Ray Kazarian. So anyway, that's our firm.
For me, where there's a Willford, there's a way. And I actually got that trademarked a few years back.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about let's talk about how our businesses may or may not intersect. How do you feel about that?
I kind of like I touched on a little bit when you're in an accident. The legal aspect of violations of law really come into play when it comes to determining uh, liability for an accident. Whose fault is it? And a lot of people think if you violate a statute or you commit a crime, that you're automatically responsible for the accident that happened. For example, I had a case one time. I had a client who was stopped at a stoplight and got rear-ended. Turned out he had had some pain. He was taking opioids for the pain. After the accident, he got taken to jail for a DUI. Uh, and yet we were still able to recover. The question becomes, is the violation of the law the cause of the accident? So for my case, he still had a DUI, which I
Well, we skipped
probably
over that
sent to
part.
you, and you.
Well, we skipped over that part. I think really we need to talk about how was he DUI? Why was he DUI? How, if he stopped at a stoplight, sitting there, not moving, driving, um, and didn't cause the accident because he got rear-ended, how is that a DUI? I guess that's really the question, right? I mean, if that's what I would be thinking, because I think I remember this case, and I think I was the one who handled it,
I think you did, yeah.
and I remember him saying, him or her saying that uh, I wasn't driving, I didn't cause the accident, therefore I shouldn't be a DUI. Well, really, that's not the what 23-152 of the vehicle code says is that you were driving a motor vehicle while under the influence of a substance, either alcohol or some sort of other substance. And it doesn't have to be a illegal substance. It could be legal. If you have prescription medication that was issued to you, you could say it was issued to me. I'm okay to take it, but you're not okay to take it if it impairs your ability to drive a motor vehicle safely.
Well, yeah, and that's interesting. So he was driving, but he was stopped at a light when he got rear-ended. So for the personal injury aspect of it, did his violation of the crime affect the accident? So here, where he stopped, he could have been asleep, and he still would have been rear-ended and injured. But when it comes to the DUI part of it, how does that work? If he's stopped at a light, the police didn't even see him driving. So how they come to the scene after the fact?
Well, case law says that if in fact that you were either in the car or if you were you were registered would have the keys and you make a statement that you were driving the motor vehicle, then that's enough to say that you were driving the motor vehicle. And the second element was being impaired, and obviously that could be by your blood or by it doesn't even have to be a blood. In this case, if it was drugs, it could just be what they call a drug recognition expert. He's the guy who comes over and determines whether or not he believes you're under the influence of some sort of substance,
And we always think of a DUI as drinking,
right?
but Isabella has a question for us.
How did they find out that he was using the
So in the case, what happened was my client was stopped. The police come to the scene of the accident, and then saw him slurring.
um,
So, but that's a great question too. Is we think of alcohol, we take a blood test and we say 0.08, you're drunk, and that's not even always the case either, because you could be a 0.07 but still be under the
My
influence.
experience from doing hundreds of DUIs, probably thousands if you want to count uh, prosecuting it on the DA standpoint and also on the defense, uh, that the police always, upon any type of encounter, always vehicle encounter, always look for impairment. That's just part of their training. And so if they come up and see that your eyes are dilated and they see that you are slurring, that's their indicia that have their, to use legal terms, their reasonable suspicion to believe that you've committed a crime, and the crime being driving under the influence. So at that point in time, they would then conduct what they call field sobriety tests. And those field sobriety tests are tests that test your motor skills to equate to driving. As a defense attorney, I never really could understand what closing your eyes and touching the tip of your nose has anything to do about driving.
I can't do that sober.
And so standing on one leg and counting to 50,
And
putting
the
your
saying the alphabet backwards.
putting your head back and saying the alphabet, saying 5 4 3 2 1 and 3 4. I can't even do it, but anyway, the point is that part of my cross-examination in trial, I always ask the police officer, when you drive a motor vehicle, when do you close your eyes and touch your nose? And they say never. And I said, and when you drive a motor vehicle, when do you stand on one leg and count to 20? Never. And when do you say out the alphabet, and when do you count with your fingers? Never. And so I always argue to the jury that all these tests they give are not indicia of actual somebody's ability to drive if they're impaired, because that's the key. It's not just driving, it has to be impaired. And the reason that I'm determining somebody's impaired is by these silly tests that they're being used to determine that.
Now, of course, they have to follow up with something more than just a field sobriety test. They have to take blood, or how do they determine what? Because if there's alcohol, they have a real simple test, a blood test. But if it's barbiturates, like in our case, or if it's marijuana, something like that, how do they determine what level you have in you?
Well, there's a couple of things that I wanted to say to that. But see, in a jury trial, a police officer is the one who always says, before he knows any of the results, that I believe I arrested him because I believed he was under the influence based on my training experience and the tests. So they don't even have any kind of blood test or breath test at that point in time. So that's why it's very important that I cross-examine them with those tests, because to show that those tests are not relevant to driving.
Right.
And then you have to, as a
That's a
defense
great
attorney, you got to
cross-examination.
attack things one thing at a time. So you attack the police officer on that, and then you attack the criminalist, either if it's blood alcohol or on any type of narcotic. And obviously, blood alcohol is by percentages. You know, everybody's heard of 0.08 is a legal limit, so it could be below a 0.08 or above a 0.08. And as far as drugs go in your system, it's always counted by nanograms per milliliter. And there's no hard and fast rule for narcotics as there is for blood alcohol. Blood alcohol, we have an 0.08, and you're under the influence, or you've broken the statute, so to speak, the law. But there is nothing to say that if you have oxycodone in your system, like how many milligrams is the cutoff? Is it 5 nanograms per milliliter? Or, for example, THC, which is a big thing out there with marijuana being legalized nowadays, is there an actual cutoff? There isn't. Some states do. I think Washington is 0.05 nanograms per milliliters, but in California there's none. So it could be higher than the Washington or lower than Washington and still be under the influence if that criminalist makes that determination.
I didn't even know that. That's interesting. And it's kind of funny you said marijuana is legal now, but it really isn't, which is maybe another topic. But federally, it's still not legal, and state law has to abide by federal law. So I think it's an interesting time for marijuana because we're living in this uncertain thing. I mean, if you bring drugs across the border, you cross through the federal. Why can't I think of the global entry? What's our federal?
The border?
Yeah. So when you come across the border, you're dealing with. Why am I drawing the blank on it?
Customs.
Customs. Yeah. What's the
ICE?
Well, you're dealing with ICE, I guess, right? But the point is, when you're coming across the border, you're dealing with federal agents, and if they find you with something, you can't bring marijuana across the border. It's illegal federally. Mm-hmm. And so I think the states now were kind of just turning a blind eye to it, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, well, my point was more of the situation of legal being you could walk over to the dispensary and you could get marijuana and ingest it and drive, just like you could drive over to the nearest liquor store, or whatever name that is, and you could get yourself a bottle of liquor and drink it. Both of them you could legally acquire them in California.
Right. Department of Homeland Security is what I was thinking of. But the Department of Homeland Security is a government agency. So it's interesting when we're talking about the states legalizing it, because it's true. You can have marijuana. That doesn't mean you can drive under the influence. And so that's interesting to see that the states are now starting to come up with some kind of a formula for what's acceptable and what's not. Mm-hmm. And California hasn't done that yet.
So circling back to the case that you handled on the personal injury side and I handled on the criminal side, it'd be safe to say that one of us could be a loser and one of us could be a winner. In your case, you actually won and collected. And in my case, my guy was convicted for a DUI because he was under the influence of a substance
Yeah.
and driving. And so therefore, but because my guy was in fact guilty of that, it didn't preclude you from making a collection on fees.
Right. So it's a different aspect altogether. What was the cause of the accident? Was it because it was under the influence? When you're stopped, there's nothing you're doing. Now, if he were in motion and if he was driving, then it becomes a huge factor in the case. And let's say he's still rear-ended, but he stopped too quickly or changed lanes when he did it, then the use of the barbiturates becomes a factor in liability.
Well, I'm sure that we're super boring talking about all this legal technicality. Let's turn to Isabella and see what questions that the public has for us.
Okay, I have one for Tom. Is it true that, like, basically, if whoever hits the other car is at fault always? Like you were talking about, like if somebody even brake checks you, I think people are under the presumption that like whoever is hitting is
Right. Well, I think a
at fault.
lot of times it comes,
Regardless.
yeah, that comes into play, especially when you have side impacts where two people are changing into the same lane. Where is the damage in the car? So you look to where the impact is. So who hit whom and what was the reason that that person was there? And if it's in an intersection, did somebody run a red light? Well, if one car has a green light, the other car has a red light, but they ran the red light, my client may have been driving and hits the other car, but if they're there illegally or for a violation of running a red light, then it becomes their fault. So determining factors, and we have experts that we use, accident reconstruction experts that'll come in and testify. I looked at the skid marks. I looked at the scene. I saw where the car ended up. I saw where the car started. And so we'll hire those experts to make a determination. Quite often they are retired police officers and they will, uh, after retiring from the police force, if they did traffic for years and years, they have a special talent that they can use to make that determination. And I'm sure that Bryan as well, you deal with that a lot where, one of the things that officers do in a trial for a criminal case, they testify, this is what my experience is, and this is why the person violated a statute. Works the same in criminal or in civil law too with the personal injury. They come to the scene. We have a police report that's made after every accident. And the police officer will interview the parties. They will look at the scene and they'll make a determination in the police report what they think the cause of the accident is. Now, that's not even admissible quite often in a trial for a personal injury case because it's hearsay quite often. But certain parts of the traffic report can be used. If a person makes a statement at the scene, for instance, if they said, "Oh, it was my fault. I'm sorry," well, that can be used, even though it's in a report and it's hearsay. We can use it as a declaration against interest. So,
What's the next question from the public?
Next question: how do you think the law enforcement differs from county to county? Have you experienced? Do you see any difference in the IE, OC?
That's a great question. So, um, Orange County obviously is a super conservative county, and so I don't want to say that other other counties, the police law enforcement is less conservative. I just think that in Orange County, um, I think that we have a very good law enforcement in Orange County, meaning that we have departments, individual cities. We have the large Orange County sheriffs and the other large agencies that we have. Um, so I believe that some of these bigger cities like Huntington Beach, Newport Beach, they do a really good job of investigating because they have the wherewithal and the talent and the resources to do that. Some of these smaller towns, without mentioning any names, I don't want to get involved with degrading people, but some of them don't have the resources and may not be able to do as great as other ones. But as far as other counties go, I believe that when it comes to the bigger counties, I find that when I had cases in Los Angeles County and it's dealing with big agencies like the LA County Sheriffs or the LAPD, that they don't really do it unless it's a giant case like a double homicide or a murder case. They really don't pay attention to the small details, and sometimes that's bad for the prosecuting agency, in that case the LA District Attorney, because uh, that if there's things left out, that just leaves things to be for the defense attorney to argue in order to get a better result.
And that's a great question too, because it brings up another point. We're probably almost out of time today, but I would like to talk about that. I handle assault and battery cases. I have a few clients that have been beat up in a bar or on the street, and police come and investigate. Now, in a case like that, it's really important for us. If the person is charged and convicted of a crime for assault and battery, that helps my case. Now, if they're not, that's not admissible because a lot of the law enforcement aren't even enforcing some of these bar fights and things like that. I have a case where it was a bar fight, and the detective said, well, it's hard for us to prosecute these because bar fights are generally two people together. My client was attacked, and so we got them to send it to the DA. The investigator sent it to the DA to determine if they were going to prosecute or not. So that's interesting. I'd like to hear maybe for another day the how they handle that in determining whether to prosecute a client or not.
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of police agencies nowadays, if it looks like a mutual combat situation, and unfortunately, the way that police officers nowadays have determined, in my opinion, whether it's a mutual combat situation. So mutual combat means both people are at fault, so they don't prosecute any. Is they determine that by who's more gravely injured, and I don't really think that that is the basis of it. For example, if I start a fight with you and then and you in self-defense knock me out and break my jaw, you shouldn't be prosecuted because you were doing something in self-defense, right? But I see that happen so often that the person, because I started it, but I ended up with a broken jaw and you had nothing, that 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 you were the one who got prosecuted.
I have a case right now. He was riding the bus in LA, and the bus driver got in an argument with him, took him outside, and started to attack my client. And he pushed him backwards. He hit his head, but then he got up and he actually got the better of the bus driver. But that doesn't mean I'm not going after this guy. You should have never done it in the first place. Those are fun ones.
Well, we put in a lot of content today. We talked about a whole lot of things. I don't know how exciting it was, but I know that we'll be able to do this again and be able to get back together with Willford Law Corporation and the law offices of Bryan R. Kazarian, and being instrumental in what. Thank you, Isabella, for putting this together and sitting there outside of the camera, being our director, so to speak. I hope that we could do this more often, Tom.
Yeah,
'Cause I really
absolutely.
enjoyed it. Maybe we could get into some more juicy stories, because we basically, in our first episode here, we shared a lot of things about ourselves. It might be kind of boring for people, but I think that in the future, in our next one, we could really get into some really juicy things and maybe have more questions from the public that Isabella could field for both civil and the criminal law.
Absolutely. And I think I'd like to delve into some of these cases a little bit more in detail because the details of the case are really interesting to me. And yeah, let's do it.
We'll try to do that. We'll change the names to protect the innocent.
There you
Remember
go.
that from Dragnet?
Isabella has no idea what Dragnet is.
All
Even
right.
though you can't see her, she's much younger.
All right. Well, thank
Thank
you.
you, sir, for coming in today.
Yeah,
That was
thank you,
awesome.
Tom. Thank you, Tom, for
Putting this
having
together.
me, and thanks for sharing your time with us. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kazarian. Where there's a Willford, there's a way.
Yeah,
We do good?
yeah, you did good. You guys
Yeah.
are naturals.
I wanted
You
it
guys
kind of
talked a lot more. You guys didn't even need me. You guys were like,
yeah,
getting
you
topics
actually
out.
moderated asking some of the
Yeah.
questions.
I thought we
I
were
was
like pause, and you guys didn't even need to like pause, and it seems like flowing
Yeah.
nicely.
And I think it helped too because there were a couple times I didn't really know where to go with it. And even though I didn't get there, I think I got some ideas on
Yeah.
how to